listen back over it. What do you guys, after you step back and read your proposals, your 2 pages from the perspective of a CEO, what did you guys think of what you wrote?
Well, I mean, I think the one thing that sticks out to me is kind of we're a little bit all over the place with our editions, trying to cover some of the content that we've covered in class through our reading materials, and trying to take 4 people who are trying to, contribute and then turn it into 1 and 2 pages has proven a little difficult for sure. So getting a little bit more, just the flow of I think could be better. The organization of it could be better.
Cool. Sammy, what did you think?
Very similar to what Mike said. I mean, we have very individual people writing in very individual ways. And it's like, okay, well, how do we go about mixing all of that together? Very similar. But other than that, I mean, I feel like we have good content. I mean, if it's exactly what you're looking for, I'm not 100% positive because I'm not going to beat around the bush, but I haven't been 100% sure exactly what you guys have been looking for. So I've been going about like what the critiques you guys have been giving back and kind of feeding off of that. But overall, like, I think we have a pretty decent paper. I mean, like Mike said, just the meshing everything together so it sounds uniform. So it kind of sounds like it came from 1 writer or even 2 writers and not 4.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
So I would agree with both Michael and Sammy in saying that, it's certainly difficult to weave everyone's styles together. I think we're there, though, as far as information is concerned. I think we just need to turn that corner into the application of the knowledge to the applied research. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think everything has come together nicely, actually. We just need to kind of, again, round that corner, turn that bend.
Okay, so, well, here's what I'm hearing you say. One of your concerns that I think all of you share is that you're concerned that's maybe a little bit of weakness in terms of making it sound like it has 1 voice. And that still seems to be a bit of a struggle for you. The other thing that you were talking about was, I think Sammy is sort of like she said, she's not 100% sure what you're supposed to be producing. And that's a concern for you guys. So we should definitely be talking about that. And a third piece was that it was sort of tricky for you still to tie it into the research question. Did I get those 3 things right?
Yes. And also, too, I have a question I wanted to propose because Brooke mentioned it in her last critiques, something about the New York store. Are we still trying to pursue that? Like, is that something you want us to see us comparing it to them? Or do you want us gathering, like, realistic data from them? Or do you just want us proposing ideas that we could do to compare it to them and, like, hypothetical proposals, not actual physical proposals?
Let's answer that one first because it's the easiest one. Hypothetical.
Okay, so hypothetical. Perfect.
We're definitely including the New York store stuff.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Evan just messaged. Anyone heard from Ralph? I'll send him the link.
He must have missed out on.
He must have missed the link for the email. I'll send it to him now.
Thanks.
No problem.
In terms of writing in 1 voice, yeah, you're not doing it perfectly. And yeah, you're doing a mostly good job, right? It's not like I'm looking at this and going, this is a horror show. It's just disjointed and jumping all over the place. Yeah. It's obvious in some spots that there's different voices, different people writing it. And that's okay because that's a hard thing to learn how to do for a team to get together and it could be a functional team. It doesn't have to be a team of students, and coming up with a report that's clear and sort of combed through That's the word I always like to use, is you just comb through the writing a few times until it sort of basically has the same flow and structure. And that's never easy. So you guys are doing great. It's practice, right? And you're going to get there. I'm very confident that you guys can do that. So no real great worries in terms of that at all. Here comes Evan, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that email with the invite. I just was getting the calendar invites, not the that. My bad.
No sweat.
Right.
You're here. How you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
I'm good.
Good. Good. What did I miss? Did I miss anything?
Not yet, really.
Not yet. Thanks, Sammy. I really appreciate that.
No, nothing nitty gritty.
Well,
Nothing that we
He's
can't
getting
fill him up on or catch him up on.
he was getting our opinion on our one additions to our proposal.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the three main points that we looked at was everybody kind of felt maybe that, well, let's ask you what you saw when you read it through as the CEO.
I think that we could work on transitioning between points a little bit better, and probably a little bit more of a intro, conclusion, overview, and kind of sum up of the points and how they relate together. Because I can, when reading it, I saw how they related just having done all the reading and kind of with that lens. But I feel like we need to kind of lead the reader a little bit more through everything.
Which
Yeah.
I have a question on, Ralph. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but when we discussed in a previous meeting, you told us to write as if we weren't writing for someone who doesn't know what we're talking about, like to write as if we're talking to somebody like you who really knows kind of like what's happening. So I'm a little confused because I think that's maybe where we're getting a little
Confused.
Yeah.
So help me out. I'm not understanding the question yet, please.
Does anybody else remember that in a previous?
Yeah, we were talking about. I think in that first week we did a lot of citing and kind of explaining what the reading meant and how it tied in. And then you had made a comment. You guys have done the reading. You know a lot of that information. So just to focus on kind of the meat of it. And so yeah, I think that might play into it a little bit, but
I think we got better at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think once we have like all of the material, kind of map it out and rearrange things and make it more cohesive.
Okay.
But I think once we have the whole thing. But.
As a CEO or a manager, if something comes across your desk, step back and think, how much time have you got for it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you want to be like too over redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
You want to get the stuff in, and you want to see what the specific problem is. You want to see what the specific solution is. You might want the person to give you 2 or 3 options as a solution. Explain which of the 3 is the best one.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to look at the person and say, excellent. Drew, make this happen. Right? So when you make a presentation, I mean, we can have Sammy make it happen. I'm easy. But when you make a presentation like that, the idea is to outline a problem, provide some solutions for the problem, what you think is important, and then argue for which of the solutions is the one that you should move forward on and how you're going to solve the problem.
Okay.
I think that ties in a fair bit with what Evan was saying, yes, in terms of the structure.
Right.
Yeah, because I feel like each week we kind of touch on a little piece of each one of those. So once we put it all together, we kind of group each corresponding piece with the other one. So I think like once we're done with all the producing material, we'll make it better.
Yeah, and I think what you're doing right now is you're being exposed to a whole bunch of stuff, right? And I mean, some of it may be familiar, but I would assume a lot of it isn't. So now you've got all these different ideas in your head and different things to think about, and you're going, well, this all seems pretty important. Which ones should matter? And you've got that on a weekly basis, and then you've got it stretched out over all the different units.
Yeah.
So there's
So for the final presentation, because I do feel like each unit, you guys kind of say if it pertains to your research question, and I do feel like all of them have for us. Are you kind of along those lines expecting for us to touch on every one of those, weekly topics in our final presentation?
No.
Okay.
When you looked at the individual differences, decision making, and motivation, I gave you guys 5 chapters on different aspects of it. And within each one of those chapters, there's 6 or 7, minimally 6 or 7 different points. So now we've got 30 different possibilities just on that alone. And we haven't even dug into the decision making yet, right?
Yeah.
So no, I don't believe each one will be, let me rephrase this. It's possible that each one would apply, but I don't think you should focus on each one. That's just way too broad.
Well, I think it's part of our job to pick the most important ones and
Yeah.
present them. So.
And when you do that in your final presentation, you can be confident that we know what the other ones are. And if we're thinking, we're getting a rough idea of what your questions are and what you guys are concerned about. And then we might raise a question, well, gee, you guys didn't look at equity theory. We think, or I think, or Brooke thinks, whatever, that equity theory can apply here for these reasons. We might ask you a question like that. And then you guys can answer back and go, oh, shit, you're right. Or we did think about that, and we think it doesn't apply as much as goal-setting theory for these reasons. And as long as we know that you can answer those questions, we're going to be good, right? And I think with any professional presentation, you can't make everything apply as a priority. And I sort of feel I said all this really poorly.
No,
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And so just cut it down to the key points you guys think. We trust you. You've got brains. You know how to use your brains. You've got a great team to work with, so you can discuss amongst yourselves all these different ideas, and then just nail down the ones that you think matter the most.
Perfect.
Right? How's that working?
I think that's
good.
Good?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I was going to ask, I guess, a question a little bit about format, presentation. We're going to be giving it live on Zoom.
Yes, sir.
So I suppose one of the teammates will possibly share a slideshow or whatever format we decide, and then we'll either have a spokesman or we can go around and all 4 of us can speak, or, I mean, is that how you envision it?
Yes.
Okay. And
let me qualify that for you a bit more, okay?
Okay.
But go ahead and ask the question, and then.
Well, and then we follow that up with 10 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a general rule, in my opinion, a professional group of managers, when they're working together and making a presentation, it's usually, especially if it's a shorter presentation, better if one person in the team presents. Okay. And the other people in the team are ready to help answer questions. So what that means, and what I think it should mean for you, is that you divvy up the content of the material that you're presenting about so that different people in the team know different parts of it in depth.
Okay.
Right?
That makes sense.
And so the skill then of the team presentation is knowing who knows what.
Gotcha.
And then and the presenter can then say, well, Sammy's going to take this question, Evan's going to cover this, and so on. So when you do that in a boardroom presentation, that's the presenter sort of becomes a little bit of an MC as well in the process.
Awesome.
So, yeah, and so then getting to your question about the slides, yeah, absolutely. One person could be using slides to help walk us through it. Now, if you are going to use slides, I have a pet peeve about slides that you might as well know about up front, is the amazing data dump that people can do with slides. You get 6 points with 15 words for each point. Bad, evil, terrible, horrible, the worst thing you can ever do to any human being. And even more importantly, it's the worst things you can do to yourselves. And here's why. Human beings are highly visual. And when we see symbols in front of us, we try to create meaning out of those symbols. Letters and words are symbols, right? So when we see a slide with a shitload of stuff on it, the first thing we do is we look at it and we try to understand, what does it mean? What's all going on here? And so you, as a presenter, lose us, the audience, because we're so busy looking at your slide, we're not listening to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, and so your slides should have 3 bullet points per slide at the most. And I don't think you want to have more than 6 words or more on that slide when you present it. That way you put up the slide, the audience looks at it, we see those are the 3 key points. Okay, that's what the presenter is going to talk about. Then the presenter comes in and starts talking about each of the points and expanding them out for us, given that we already have a rough sense of what it is that you're going to cover. Night, Dr. Watson.
Night, Dr. Hank.
That's Joel. Have you guys met Joel yet? Joel, are you gone? You want to say hi?
Sure. For sure. Hey guys, how are you?
Hi.
How's it going?
Doing?
Doing
Good.
well.
Doing well.
Good.
Joel's important for 3 reasons.
Only 3.
Beyond that, though, we're done. He loves his family dearly. He's an amazing friend. And he's also put together the technology system here in our room so that we can communicate.
Is it working all right for you guys?
Working great.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and he also knows a thing or two about marketing, it turns out.
So I'll be seeing all of you guys next semester.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
In January in Denver, which will be fun. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to working with you guys.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Looking forward to it.
All right. I'll let you get back to it.
Night.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.
Well, now you're back to me again. Are you still there?
Yes.
Cool. I can't see you. Why can't I see you?
We can see you.
Yeah, that's not necessarily a good deal. But there you go. Okay, it's a touch. It's a touch screen, and I'm not used to them. I was born and raised on a mouse. Well, I'll tell you a quick true story. Not that I would ever tell you a false one. I started a business in Vancouver in 1984 up in Canada, and you may or may not remember that Apple released its Macintosh back then, and on the Super Bowl ad, they had that kick-ass ad about the Orwellian world where everybody was being controlled by the computer, and then out of the computer screen comes a Macintosh, which can never control you, but you can express yourself fully. Cool ad. Dig back into it if you got nothing better to do one day. My partner in my business absolutely had to have the first Mac in Vancouver. We ended up getting the 3rd one that came in, and we paid 150% premium on that stupid machine. But he had to have it, just absolutely had to. So I learned running all my computer stuff with a mouse, as opposed to insertion points and all that stuff that you didn't work perfect, and that. And so I got really spoiled, and I use my iPad and go, okay, I'll touch the screen there, but beyond that, it's quite right. Anyways, so we were talking about the presentations and keeping your slides really simple so that people get the basic idea of what you're going to talk about, let them read it, and then you come forward as a presenter and start talking and outline each point. 3 points per slide is plenty. Human beings tend to work to some degree in 3s. Short-term memory actually holds 7 numbers. You've probably seen this experiment where people can remember a telephone number, right? Because it's 7 numbers, but they can't remember a telephone number with an area code as quickly or as easily. When it comes to ideas, we can usually handle 3 at a time. So use that to help you make better presentations.
Awesome. And then one more thing to expand on that. So off of the 10-minute Q&A on the back end of that presentation, we're going to build our 5-page final proposal. Or it's pretty much going to be built, but we're going to add some tweaks to it based on that Q&A. Is that what you guys envision? Or
Well, I'd like to believe we'll have something of wisdom to say, maybe not.
Surely. Okay.
Well, and you'll have the entire class is going to be there watching your presentation as well. They may have input as well where you go, oh yeah, because they've seen the same material and they may look at the same kind of and have the same kind of questions. Well, what about this? Don't you think this would fit in? And you might change your mind and change your proposal accordingly.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Is this helping?
Yeah,
Cool. Good.
tying up some loose ends.
Well, it's important. We're getting toward the end here, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're unhappy about what I said or, yeah, the end is coming. I've got so much work to do. Oh, my God.
Both.
I have a lot of work to do, and I'm just losing steam really quickly.
Yeah, it was like last week was week 4, and now it's.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Yeah, you're almost done, right?
It's flown by, and all the big stuff is due, I feel like, in the next couple of weeks. So it's make or break time.
All that stuff I've been working on all semester.
Yeah.
Well, I consider this, if you've been thinking about it all semester and you've got little bits and pieces and notes, which is why we structured things the way we did in this class, you really just have to bring them together. You don't have to start something from scratch.
Yeah.
Sure.
And in this course too, 5 pages allows you to stay pretty focused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine we'll probably have more than 5 pages and we'll have to condense. I mean, for sure. So.
Yeah. Well, so send me a rough draft and I can help you to try to condense it. I mean, I don't mind looking.
Thank you.
As long as we can get it to you in a timely manner.
When would you want it by, like a rough draft to look over? Like when would be like your last date that you'd be willing to look over?
Well, here's my reality. You're sending me rough drafts during final exam week.
Yeah.
So earlier in the week is going to get a quicker response. Later in the week might get one of those, gee, I really want to help you emails, but I'm so swamped.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to ask you. I know you're kind of super busy over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys are really, really important to me as well. So it's not like I'm going to sort of sit there and try and duck it. And you might find me doing something like sending you a quick video response where I read over it and just point to a couple of things and say, here's what I think here and here, as opposed to writing you something. For me, I sometimes feel it's easier to talk it out than just to write it down when responding to stuff.
And that works great for us. So
earlier in the week is definitely going to be better, right? Because I'm leaving for St. Louis on the 20th, which is Thursday. I got to go look at some properties over there. And then on the 21st, I'm flying to Toronto to be with family for Christmas. So that's tightening up the tail end of the week. And I don't have to have your grades in until the 27th, I don't think, which is just so weird. It's absolutely weird.
So I think we have another class that ends on the 23rd or 24th. No, not 24th. That's Christmas. Yeah, it ends on the 20th. Never mind. I forget when Christmas is, you guys.
We're brushing up close to it this year for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's insanely stupid. Well, it is, because you know how many undergraduate students I've got. We're in the middle of nowhere, right? And how many undergraduate students are coming and saying, Dr. Hank, about that final exam, is there any way we can schedule around it so that I can get home to my family? Because I need to get on a flight because I'm going to Florida or Louisiana. And I'm going, well, yeah, we'll try our best. And that's what you get when you tie it in that tight to Christmas. But truth to tell, remember when you used to get a 3-day break for Thanksgiving when you were in undergrad school? And people would tell me on Monday and Tuesday, well, I need to leave early to get back to my family. And now they get a 1-week break, and Thursday and Friday, well, I need to leave early to get back.
They'll always be trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think undergraduate students would like to be here for the first 2 to 3 weeks and then be done with it. We're good. All the drinking's finished. We've partied. We've got wasted. All is good. Thank you. Bye. See you next term.
But I wanted to come back for the last 2 weeks and finish strong.
You can always do that, I suppose, too, right? But
In undergrad, you can. Jeez, oh my gosh.
So yeah, some of my classes for sure.
yeah, it's
In undergrad, you could totally flake out the whole semester and then ace the class at the end. In some classes, like
Speak for yourself. I studied theology. I had to read hundreds of pages and write hundreds of pages.
yeah. Well, I'm saying some classes,
Yeah, some of them.
not all.
Oh, I mean, my pottery classes were pretty easy.
Exactly. Like I had a music class. You could just stroll around listening to music and then show up and you're cool.
photography classes can work that way.
Yep.
I'm Canadian, and we don't have this concept of gen ed up in Canada. And so when I first got down here and I saw that undergraduate students could actually take a class in bowling for credit in first year, I'm going, really?
We're not working.
Where did they do bowling? That's so
Bowling,
cool.
and this is going to sound stupid, but it's so cool. Nice. Bowling Green State University. They had a bowling alley in town. Bowling Green was this little town of, well, the university had 23,000 students. The town itself had maybe 10,000 people. And it was the only thing to do. There was nothing else to do. And so it was insane. But I was like, okay, fine. I mean, gym as a class in undergraduate school was like, really?
I never understood that either. I was exempt from any type of that, like gym or anything like that, because I did athletics all 4 years. But all my friends who didn't, they had to do some type of like fitness course or something. And I was like, that's so stupid. You're in undergrad.
All my friends took stage combat in the film department. And that's how they got.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, activity credit or whatever.
Yeah.
So you'd always see them out on the lawn, like sword fighting. It was really fun.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so let's keep moving forward. And so you were concerned about one other thing I heard you say, I believe, was about tying things back into the research question. And let's take a look at that. What I did is here, I'm going to share the screen with you guys. And here you go. And you get into being a little smaller. And let's get this up. Here's my thoughts as I read through your paper. I actually read through them a couple of times. The first comment I want to make is that your writing is getting stronger.
I feel it is as well.
Yeah, it's easier to read. It's more lucid. It's more clear. You guys are really starting to pick that up and understand how that works. Good for you. Well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at this. You started off with looking at diversity. And I don't necessarily want to read through this, but he talked about how at REI they ask people where they're from, and they say they're from this state or that state. And I was thinking to me, that's not that big of a cultural difference. I mean, as I put down over here, explain to me exactly what the difference is between a Cornhusker and a Sooner. And they're not that different. They all vote for shitty football teams.
Well, I think what we were trying to get at, because when we were talking about it in the group meeting, was basically like, somebody from the South could have some, differences with how they view a race, where somebody from the North, I mean, that's a very general and very like broad thing to say. However, there's an underlying truth, we feel.
And I think you're right. I just don't think it breaks down so well by state.
I think it's also coming from a place because at the beginning we were wanting to look at Denver and New York and kind of comparing and contrasting, the different cultural contexts and how that might influence communication. And then I think kind of diverted away from that. But I think that's where that was coming from, because we were at one point really focused on different stores and how communication might work better in this store for this reason. And, so I think, I don't know. But.
And again, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And again, I completely agree with that. Living in New York and living in Denver, the people in New York who are dressed in black top to bottom, and the people in Denver that are much more laid back are two very different cultures, right?
Yeah.
There's no question about that.
I think it's just more eye-opening for us to see that it was actually flipped the other way. That, in Denver, it wasn't just Colorado people that were working at the Denver REI store. It's, people from all over the country. So I think we were all kind of entering in, or at least I entered in with the assumption that, the majority of the people at the Denver store are going to be Denver surrounding area, Colorado people in New York, similar situation. So that was just my assumption though, coming into it.
As an aside, Denver is getting the greatest number of influx of young people from across the United States of any city in the country. It's really quite intriguing. And I think one of the things, and you do point to this in here, I think one of the things that ties them all together is the real interest in getting into the Rocky Mountains.
Yep.
Tons of people who want to get into that outdoor lifestyle, that recreation lifestyle. And that's kind of hard to do in Manhattan, let's say, unless you want to climb buildings, which I think the cops in Manhattan frown on a little bit.
You can go to Central Park. There's stuff there.
One note on the exercise of asking them what state they're from, it also fills in for the lack of data we have on the demographic breakdown in store. I could generalize it by, going in every day and kind of telling you guys who I see, but other than that, that's kind of the only hard data really I had for diversity in our store. So that's why we used it here.
And again, you're fine. I'm just saying you probably want to look a little touch broader.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because now if you're thinking diversity is a potentially an issue with the communication, then you need a test for it as well, right? And so consider, how are you going to test for it? I mean, it seems to me that kind of thing is more readily done in a strictly quant survey, or at least if you're going to have a study that's both quant and qual, you just slip that into the quant side, right? Look over the U.S. I mean, what do you think are the major regions? There's the South, there's the Northeast, there's the Midwest, there's the West, and then there's La La Land. I think that's a fair split. What do you guys think?
Wait, what's La La Land?
California.
Oh.
I love it. Well, and there was also, in our marketing class, we've gotten a couple different outdoor rec reports that break down by region as well. So we could use, I suppose, those same regions.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Right? Why reinvent the wheel when it's already there?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if it seems like the outdoor industry is using that as a base model, then maybe we'll try to latch onto it. So.
Yeah. Okay. The question is, how can we use leadership? How can leadership use that shared value to enhance communication regarding workplace strategies and organization? I think that's a great question. And you can tie that into your research question, and you can say, this is one thing we want to focus on. So I see that as really good. Then you go into Tinsley and Ellie and argue that people are more likely to behave in ways that undermine their chances for success when they're disconnected from information systems. And that's a huge jump for me. I'm going, why am I listening about information systems all of a sudden? So you're going to have to help me a bit. How does this all tie in? Because you say from this we can extract that poor communication is cyclical in nature. Well, you're talking about diversity, and now you're talking about tech and cycles, and I honestly couldn't follow that.
This is my bit, and I think I definitely made a leap here from earlier. We were talking about in previous editions, and I kind of made a little bit of an assumed knowledge, I suppose. The argument I'm trying to make is that the disconnect, the diversity, I guess, in our store, but also the disconnect between employees that aren't in for weeks at a time, don't get to see their supervisors but once a month, things like that. Those make the problem of communication worse. And so it's, I'm
Let me
stretching here a little bit, I suppose. It made more sense when I was writing it, that's for sure.
Well, I read it as like information systems is just like a network of information. So that's kind of how I read it, and it made more sense in that context. But
well, I understand what you mean by information systems, but what I'm trying to understand is how that relates to diversity, because that's what you're talking about. Yeah. And Michael, am I hearing you maybe say something along the lines of, look, there's different people using these systems in different ways, and so in fact, that is a form of diversity right there?
To be honest, I don't think that's what I was trying to get at.
Oh, okay.
And I know, and that makes some sense. I think, golly,
don't worry, don't sweat it too much.
No, I'm actually interested in why I have it in my mind. I'm just having a hard time explaining it, but we can move on if you want. I'm sorry.
Well, do you guys, how important is it to you?
I think we could probably, like you said, the question is, how can leadership use that shared value to enhance communication regarding workplace strategies? That may have been where we should have stopped instead of trying to.
Well, I think it's a very relevant point, and it kind of, when I was rereading them, it kind of fits in with the section that I wrote about, let's see, behave in ways undermine for like personality traits and kind of taking a little bit of responsibility for themselves and how they, are influencing communication and the communication system that they're in. So I like the point. I think it just might be better used somewhere else.
Good enough. It was just, like I said, for me, it was a jump. I was reading it going, I'm sure they're trying to say something, but I'm sadly not getting it. Not to be too picky, where's my stupid mouse? The shares value should be shared, of course, but there you go with spell check, right? Emotion and moods. This paragraph here, and it comes over here, all this suggests to me is that emotion or mood are not or should not be an issue at REI. When I read through that, it sounds like, well, gee whiz, we've got all these shared feelings about things, and we've got this great place to work, and we've got all this information. People are able to express themselves through the campfire network. They're able to say things. They create a place where people feel safe. All right, I get that. So are you telling me that emotions and moods are not important when you're looking at REI? Is that what you're driving at here? Which can be okay. If that's what you're driving at, it's fine. It's just not clear to me whether or not that's what you're driving at, because it sure sounds like that stuff isn't going to be an issue for your communication stuff. I mean, that's how it came across to me.
I think so, for sure. And I think that it's one of the things they do well, and this piece of our edition is more kind of, I guess, us thinking out loud to figure that out. But yeah, I totally agree, Ralph. I think that they do that well. It most likely would not be something we include in our presentation.
Cool. Because that's when I read that, that's what I thought. So another great rule of writing and presenting, guide your reader through, or the person you're presenting to through it, because we tend to be idiots, especially executives. They're first grade morons. No, when you're Michael's having more fun than this, and necessarily everybody.
I totally understand where you're coming from with that. So
yeah, hold our hand as presenters and readers. Don't try to get us to extrapolate and figure it out for ourselves. Nail it down for us. Tell us, where's my hand? There it is. Tell us exactly what it is that you want us to think. We get to disagree if we want, but tell us, this is what I think. Emotions and moods are so well taken care of at REI, it just can't see how it would be an issue. Fair enough. That's your conclusion. I tend to agree, as a matter of fact, right? Let's go into the leadership stuff. Communication strengths and weaknesses are in many ways a personification of our personality traits. I like that idea. I'm a bit of a philosopher. That's just such a cool thought, because usually we don't dig into that so much, right? We tend to talk more about behaviors, and of course communication is a behavior, but I just absolutely love that you put it there. Now,
I kind of come from the philosophy theology stuff, so that's it might be hard to get me out of that. So
it may be impossible, and peace be with you. I've got 3 philosophy degrees. You'll never get me to stop being a philosopher, and I'm quite content with that.
Oh boy.
All is good.
Yeah.
Here, though, I needed a bit of help in your next sentence. In an attempt to enhance communication at the REI Denver flagship store, we encourage employees to identify personality traits that can enhance their professional experience. With the we, is this REI that does that? Because it sounds almost as if a person from REI is writing this.
So this
is that we as the group?
It's we as well. I meant it as we as the group, because I kind of interpreted this as more of a next step, solution type idea. So that was, and then obviously a lot of the personality quizzes that we took, and the one where you did the keys, I thought a lot of those were very insightful, kind of like I said, with the lens of communication on. It was like, oh, maybe that's why, so I was starting to connect a few more dots there. So
cool.
I didn't say it right, but that's kind of where
well, you had a pronoun without referring to something, so I got confused. Our Denver's flagships are our team encourages employees to identify personality traits that can enhance their professional experience. That's all you got to do, right?
Okay.
That's I'm good now. I get it. Though I am going to ask you a question. How does all the stuff that you talked about here tie into your research question? I really need your guys' help here.
Yeah, and that's and that might be small line connecting the two, but I kind of took it as if we're deeming communication as the issue, we'll kind of learn what the issue is. But as a next step, I kind of mentioned in there that, while yes, the company needs to do a better job of creating a work environment that's productive, employees also need to take a little bit of responsibility for that. And so rather than saying, it's also your fault, I thought that this would be a good way for them to kind of perhaps come to some of those conclusions themselves and say, kind of like I did, getting some insights on my personality based on communication, based on, reaction time to something,
So let me check with you, please, Evan. What I'm hearing you say is that some self-awareness on the part of the employees and understanding how they communicate might be an invaluable activity to help the communications overall at the store.
Yes. And that's kind of where I was thinking that Michael's previous point could fit into this section about, how they're more likely to disconnect if they're not, in tune with some of those information systems.
Cool.
And
okay. I see that now. It makes sense. I'm getting it.
I'll just try to write it better.
It's practice.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And like I say, guide your reader through it. Assume that you're trying. This is how I did my dissertation. I assumed that I was trying to explain it to my grandma.
Okay.
What do I have to say this? And my grandma understands it. She's not a highly educated woman. She's pretty bright, pretty smart. She reads lots. But what do I need to say so that she gets all this technical crap I'm writing about in my dissertation? That's just the guide I used. I was talking to her. Long dead though she was. I don't want to get too macabre here.
I was going to say, I'll use your grandmother, not mine. Mine is a little bit more loopy.
Now, I chose the less loopy one. My dad's grandma was less loopy. My mother's grandma was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
To work, but we're not going to go there. Okay, here it's just a couple, watch your writing, right? I mean, here, however, might recommend, we might, I'm sure. So when you talk about the motivation, you're again, and I'm going to skip over this one a little bit and leave this with you. Your expository writing is really pretty strong. You're letting us know what the content is. what's weak here is you're not telling us how this relates back to your research question clearly. It's hard for me to get a handle on what it is that you think about motivation that's important. You're telling me true things and you're explaining them really well. And what's missing is how does this tie into your research question? So that's where I need you guys to focus a little more, okay? The writing's great. The explanations are accurate. I get it. You're correct. Help me see how this matters, okay? So that's something I'll leave with you guys for now.
Well, it sounds like that's kind of reflects what we all said was our issue. So, and we're conscious of it, and I think that's step one. So,
yeah, I don't want to beat this.
Oh, I was gonna say this was also like our earlier, right?
That was the first one.
I think we've come a long way since then. But if you could quickly, briefly go over the emotion part again. I just was having a hard time understanding what you were getting at because that was my portion. So I want to see like where I could have improved or what I could have done differently.
Sorry if I was speaking over you on your part, Sammy.
No, that's okay. I was totally like listening to everything. I just want to kind of reiterate.
What I got, let's see if I understand. What I got from reading this section, Sammy, is that REI is really good at allowing people to express their feelings, really good at welcoming and encouraging people to be honest and straightforward and comfortable with their feelings, and provides a whole bunch of different ways to do that. So I was reading through it and I was going, well, if REI does all these things well, it seems that that part of individual differences, the emotion and the affect, is not causing a problem for communication.
I see.
And so REI is doing such a good job there, we don't need to worry about it.
I see. Okay.
I think that one could too also fall into the category of next steps, because I feel like with a lot of the things that we've been talking about within our group each week, it seems like REI has a lot of the necessary components. They're just not utilizing them or executing these things very well. And so I think that they could probably use some of that information better to increase communication. But I don't know, how much, we'll focus on next steps compared to the actual question. But
okay, so let me go back to Sammy, please. Is that what you're trying to let me know, is that they have all these things that they do and they're unfortunately not working?
I think that was the point of what I was trying to get across, because REI does a very good job, as everyone knows, as evoking emotion from within the co-op to the people who work for them and who visit the store. You walk into the store and you get such a positive feeling when you generally walk in. Generally.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I think like pointing out like, okay, they do this really well. Maybe I should write it a little bit differently to show like they do this well. However, there's still a disconnect with communication. And why is there? Like, let's try to find the thorn in the lion's paw kind of thing.
Got it. Then you will just need to add a sentence at the end.
Yeah.
They have all this great stuff. They do all these great things.
Right.
And yet it seems to me that there might be a disconnect.
Right.
I will say just, and so Sammy works in REI in New York as well. I think we've talked about this. And I work at this store. I agree with that we have all these great things in place that we don't utilize, but I'm not sure if the systems they have in place that positively affect emotions and moods among employees are one of the things that they don't utilize well.
Well, I'll leave that to
it's that one point. So it'll be something we have to talk about, obviously, and figure out. But I think overall that point is huge. REI is this great company, does all these great things. They have all these systems in place to make sure that they don't have a breakdown in communication, but they don't utilize them well. I just don't know if it's in the arena of emotions and moods or somewhere else. So it's a question for us all to discuss after this.
Yeah.
Well, can it be both and?
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely just be utilized better. Not that they're not utilizing them well right now, but yeah.
I mean, it could be a management weakness is that a lot of times what happens with an organization is that the early visionaries in the organization have some very clear ideas of what works and how they want to have a unique and special culture. And they get together and they drink beers or drink milk or whatever it is that they do. And they come up with these really cool ways of doing things, and then they implement them. And they work really, really well. And then you guys ever play that game of telephone when you were kids? One
Yeah.
person, right? And by the time it sifts down through how many people, thousands of people work for REI,
Yeah.
how many managers do you have? The vision of the people that started it, it's sort of there and it's put out explicitly, but not necessarily the case that everybody understands what that means.
Very true.
That is on point.
That is very much on point. I mean, for an example, I work in the Norwalk store, and maybe 25 miles away is a store in Milford, Connecticut. And we've had people quit in Milford to come to Norwalk because they hate the management there.
Yeah.
So,
But you said it perfectly. So if you could just type that up and send it to us.
Yeah, right.
No, we have it on video, Evan. It's okay.
It doesn't filter down. You're right, though, Ralph. That's what happens. They've got these systems that they say this is how you're supposed to do it. It's worked before, but it doesn't make it all the way down. And I think
it's up to interpretation.
There's so many employees. There's so many managers. There's so many supervisors. There's just this. So it's all stuff we'll have to look at. But
it's also like up to interpretation. You ever see those experiments where people are given written instructions, and you can give 5 people the same written instructions and they'll do it totally differently.
Yeah.
It's up to interpretation.
So then, Sammy, where you're leading us, I think, is into the area of decision making and framing, and the cognitive biases, right? So people bring their biases and they bring their frames with them, and that influences how they understand the vision, and so therefore influences how it gets implemented.
Okay. And that relates into their emotion. Fine. You're okay with that?
Well, yeah. It's what we're talking about right now.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure if we're stretching it too far. But
I don't think so. I mean, this is a big question. Okay, this isn't like I wonder how many people we've got that have a different background from the United States. That's a down and dirty question. To come up with your 5 regions, do you belong to which region? Questions asked, answers got. Trying to figure out what kinds of frames people bring with them, what kinds of cognitive biases people bring with them, and how that at the management level might be undermining their ability to implement a basic vision of the company.
Right.
Huge question.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's huge.
And you guys discuss amongst yourselves, is it there? Is that where it lies? Because if it is, then maybe you've already narrowed it. You've found that place where you want to focus on with your research study. But I leave that up to you guys to discuss, because I don't know REI that well, for one, and you've got 2 experts in the team that know the company.
Far from expert.
Well,
trying to be.
We're on the in.
At the very least, right?
Yeah.
And that provides your team with some really important insights. So I'll leave that with you guys. That's
really good. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Glad you brought us back to that.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there and I was like, wait, how come I'm not understanding my own section that you just talked about? There must be something wrong there. Again, the filter, right? We just talked about that.
It's all about cognition and negotiation. That's life right there.
Right.
A quick aside, as a grad student, I was involved with looking at how sociolinguistic frames played out and caused intractable environmental disputes. And my boss at Penn State, she got a whack load of money to do this research project. And she would take us out for very nice dinners. And occasionally there would be bottles of wine involved. And I still remember one day we were in Washington doing presentations to some of the parks people down in there. And we all decided it's all about framing. That was our theme for the night. And the more wine we drank, everything was about framing. It was frightening. Every single word anybody said.
That's fine.
That's great.
So let's look into the team stuff. REI Denver staff is large for retail space, thus leaving vast amounts of physical space for disconnect. I'm getting that. Reviewing the breakdown in communication at REI team structure might lead us to some further clues as to the source of the infrequent upkeep of company chatter and changeover. The function of the teams in the co-op environment prove that an unmanaged laissez-faire mentality does exist. So I'm probably being far too picayune here. How does the function of the teams do that? I don't get that.
So this was my section leading in, Ralph. So the function of the team, so that's kind of where, leading off of Michael and Sammy's management experience and understanding where a potential disconnect might be, if that is a shift changeover, and how that is documented and communicated in, say, their internal records, might be an information system of sort, or a physical note handed off between shifts or something to that effect. So that could certainly be expanded upon.
Okay. So let me see. When you're talking about the function of the team, you're not talking about different functions. I mean, let me take a step back so you guys can help me out. Within organizations, and you'll see this more down the road in strategy, there's various functions. You can have accounting, you can have marketing, you can have finance, you can have HR, right? Those are functional areas in an organization. So when I read this and you say function, that's where my head goes, like Sam, as I bring my frame. Is that what you were driving at?
No, just the general existence of the team, how they interact. Not necessarily a department, but I mean, as it relates to management working together.
Sorry for keeping on jumping in because I'm all excited. So what are you driving at, Drew, and how the team functions?
Correct.
Works. Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So, and then we tie that back into the information system. So how the teams work hand in glove with the information systems, which you guys mentioned up top. And so that then brings back what Evan and what Michael were saying. The information systems interaction with the teams and what the teams do creates a disconnect, creates a problem because of the structure of it. It's not necessarily even the people, it's just simply the structure itself that creates the problem.
Valid and a contributing factor in many respects.
Okay, cool.
At least from what we know.
Yeah, well, no, that's from what you know. And that's when you do research, when you interview people in companies and in organizations, and they're saying, we have a communication problem. Well, you go in, right, and you start talking to people and you interview the people and find out what's going on. As a precursor, usually you'll have the executive team that brings you in. So you ask them what are the main issues, and then you decide how to measure it, right? So that's what you would be doing when you're doing this kind of thing. And you might decide to dig way deeper into that issue, right? Am I making any sense?
Yes.
Okay. This part here, at the bottom of this, where's my stupid thing? I got to make this thing black on here. I keep forgetting to do that because everything's white, so I can't see it. Applying an employee exchange approach to roles while maintaining the current team intact will boost the employee perspective and offer insight into existing communication channels. I think if what I think you're saying is what you're saying, this is way cool, because that can be a really great way to study the teams, can't it?
Right. So we could maybe potentially dabble in something like that, and might be suggested for further research, because it would be a second step further.
Well, why not just make it your first step? You've got one of the most beautiful things that you can ask for when you're doing research. You've got a control group and you've got a modification to a group. That's as good as it gets.
Right. We know what exists, and maybe changing it in one scenario might offer visibility into what the channel disconnect is.
Yeah, right? I wouldn't be in a rush to throw it out.
Okay.
It's more of a quantitative approach when we're
Right.
comparing quant to qual. At the same time, it's beauty, eh? I mean, you can get a control group going, because that won't disrupt the company that much, will it?
Exactly. It's already built in. It already exists with intact teams. There's really no major changes.
Cool.
But offering it up might allow perspective.
That's what I think it might do as well. Okay, so let's keep going. When I'm reading this part, in more ways than one, the REI Denver flagship store can also be described as self-managed. And I think you're right. That's part of the philosophy there, right? The majority of successful self-managed consists of teams with regular full-time employees in environments that encourage and initiate communication among employees. At the REI Denver flagship store, now stick with me on this, with a rising number of part-time and seasonal employees, there is little opportunity for effective and efficient communication with the current institutional management structure. Are you trying to suggest that self-managed teams may not be the right way to go here? It's okay if you are.
Kind of. I'm just
Yes.
saying it might not be utilized in the best way possible, or they can take components of a self-management structure and implement them. But just given, specifically those two factors, it makes self-management really difficult when you don't have consistent employees.
And I think, I agree. And I think that it doesn't mean that self-management doesn't work. It means that most of the REI stores are way smaller. And so this self-management style does work. But in this store, they're going to have to approach things a little bit differently. That doesn't mean it doesn't work completely. It just means that they're going to have to do things a little different.
Yeah. Tell me something, a little bit of background on REI, please. How big was the first co-op?
Seattle.
Uh-huh.
That was, well, it's now a flagship. I don't think it was very large back in the day. I mean, originally it was just.
In 1937, it was 26 guys that decided that they needed better ice axes.
Right. And then the husband and wife basically started the co-op, and people joined it, and that was it.
The first store didn't open until the 50s, maybe?
We just learned about
I need to
this.
go back and look at my history a little bit here.
Yeah.
That's okay. You've given me what I'm looking for. I remember the first co-op I worked for was a food co-op. And as a side again, which I'm sorry for wasting your time, every apron that I wear to this day is cut out from that original pattern. It's not that far aside. Here you've got a group of people who are cooperatively working together to get a specific product, and then they say, okay, well, let's make some kind of a store. You've got such a small group of people that self-management for running retail enterprise really works easily. Once you get into, like, Denver's freaking huge, right?
Yeah.
Joel and I were in there, and you may need, because it's retail, you may need more control and command structure simply by virtue of what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
Totally.
And like teaming and self-managed teams, I think, are absolutely great. But maybe you want more of a team where there's a specific person in charge who is the leader of the team, as opposed to teams determining for themselves who leads when and under what circumstances, who listens to what the team has to say, charges them with a specific activity. Okay, you guys discuss, we'll work together as a team, we'll find out what's going on, and then I'll bring it forward to different levels. And that forces a communication that could slip through the cracks when you're strictly self-managed, right? Okay, cool. This is fascinating to me, what you guys are doing.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, here you guys are going after the management. But to make smarter decisions in this sort of system, all members must exercise their power and voices. Many of the key elements that lead to the success of self-management styles are missing at an organizational level at the REI Denver flagship. So it's those damn managers.
Well, hey, in my defense, I also put blame on the employees in the last section too.
So what
Evan
I'm
ties
asking
it together.
here is something that you know as a fact, or are you hypothesizing it? Because it's a reasonable hypothesis.
I would say I was hypothesizing that when I wrote it. That specific line kind of came out of our first discussion, because that was when we were kind of realizing that it might not be the REI Denver flagship store. It might be, at an organizational level. So I was maybe made a failed attempt to take a step back and generalize it a little bit more. But
well, it's okay to hypothesize. I mean, that's what we do, and it's actually kind of smart, because now you have another thing to ask about when you're doing your research. Maybe this is what you want to focus on. And let me get back to our original discussion about what are you supposed to be doing? And there's so many things to look at, and where should we focus? Do you see how many different things you guys are suggesting that we could think about?
But I do notice there's a theme, like you were mentioning in this part here about the management. Management seems to be a reoccurring theme as far as like the disconnects. So maybe that's something we could focus on when we do our presentation, is like the disconnects with the management, and then comparing it to other flagship stores, and if they have the same managerial problem, because that's the constant through all the REIs. I mean, REI has a varying number of employees. However, they all have very similar amount of managers in each department.
And it also could be that the managers aren't getting the relevant information to pass
training.
on. Could even, bump it higher up. So that could be a good. I think management would probably be the smartest place to start, because it could lead us either, the relationship between management and employee, or management and upper management.
And they're the most engaged employees at the store. So.
Well,
yeah. And well, also too, like there's some employees, like they're very seasonal. They're only working to make a little money during college break. They don't care about the store. The managers are there full time. They're getting their benefits. They're getting their pay. They care about the store. So why is there a communication issue on a managerial level if they should have most invested in the store?
Here's a hypothesis. REI really does sort of encourage a peace, love, and groovy approach, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. How many peace, love, and groovy people do you know that like to tell other people what to do?
Not a lot.
0.
Hey, I hadn't even thought of that yet, actually.
And
You can't be bossy and
it
peaceful.
goes into the managerial style, that self-management, kind of laissez-faire, hands-off system. I think that's how the managers are coached to manage us. And so until maybe that's where we need to look, is how they're trained to handle, regular employees, seasonal employees, part-time employees, things like that.
I could probably throw a line in about that in my personality traits section, talking about,
Let me say this. If you don't have to be a hard ass, unpleasant, autocratic, demanding leader in order to point out that it's important for us to go in certain directions. and guide your employees to go in that direction. Now, the guiding does take a certain amount of taking responsibility and sticking your neck out a little bit and saying, this is where we want to go. And somebody who's themselves, well, nobody's going to tell me where to go. And then you've got, well, I think it is a little important at least, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay, cool. This is a fun conversation.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
And
Very helpful.
Very
it's
lucky with our group
interesting. Yeah,
too.
it's
At
very
least
interesting.
I feel we were lucky with our group because we,
Don't
from my
worry.
perspective, get along well.
Yeah, agreed.
So Drew, that's the first thing you've said in quite a while. Am I?
I'm sorry. I am heavily annotating and scribing this conversation.
He
Drew's
takes
really
notes
good
for us
at
while we
that.
talk usually.
Just emailed us a wonderful document of our notes.
Yeah, he's really good at that. We love him for that.
All right.
And
So
appreciate him.
you're expressing and getting to express all your ideas by controlling the communication within the team.
Well, no, just scribing and accepting your suggestions as
Leaving
they
out the ones he doesn't like.
soon be applied.
Okay, but you're good. We've got all your concerns covered.
I'm doing great. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for checking in.
Well, I don't have much else to add. If I keep talking, I might not look very clever anymore. So I'm stopping here while I might even be ahead of the team. Do you guys have any questions? Or do you
No, I think this has been super helpful.
Yeah, you cleared a lot of stuff up for us. So
Yeah.
Definitely. And then would you email us those with your annotations on it?
me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Be happy to.
Thank
Just
you.
yeah, that would be awesome.
spark some thoughts when we're going through it.
Well, here's my overall impression of you guys. A, you're really thinking about this. You're taking the time to consider very carefully what you're trying to look at and what you're trying to deal with. You're showing to me very clearly that you understand the material. You're struggling with how the material might specifically apply to the organization. And I think that's to be expected and is normal when you're really thinking about all the possible pieces. So the struggling that you guys are doing, I think, is really healthy and actually demonstrates to me that you're really thinking about it and taking it really seriously. And kudos to you guys for doing that. Way to go. You're starting, and I think going to be able to bring this down to getting more focused. I'm getting a clear sense from you guys that you're starting to get a real feel for where you want to go and how you want to focus this and how to tighten up your writing, because you're really only going to have 5 pages in the end. And my bet is when you go back to the original proposal, you're going to realize there's a lot you get to cut out of there because of how much more you've learned since then and how much more specific you get to be. So I think you're going to find yourself a lot of writing space there. I think you're doing a really great job. I think that you're taking this idea to some really cool places, and I'm proud of how hard you're working and how successful you're being.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
You're welcome. It's a treat. You guys are fun to talk with.
Thank you, Ralph. Me too. I'm really excited for this personally because, like, I could see this as something that we could present to the board of REI, and be like, hey, like, this is an issue and we got to fix this in the stores. Like, how can we kind of restructure to fix it,
And I'd love to take a promotion to help you figure out.
To implement this new system.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to end the meeting for all of us. I think, especially having talked with you guys, that your grade should go up a bit higher than the one I gave you based strictly on the reading. It's one of the reasons I like to talk with teams, because sometimes you learn things from talking that you can't see in the writing. So I think you should get a straight A on this, what's 95% of 45? Anybody got that off the top of their head? Let me
2.5.
42, really? You know this.
Yeah.
Did you do that in your head?
Yeah.
No. You're such a liar.
Okay. Now,
He's got a calculator.
No, it's all right. This is simple, guys. I know we're not mathematicians. But on to the next one.
42.5 it is. I'm going to kill this meeting. If you guys want to meet and talk, of course, that's your business. But is it okay if I just end the meeting for everybody?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you, Ralph.
Have a good one.
Have a
Thanks
good
for
one.
being so late, Sammy.
Oh, yeah. No
Bye.
problem. Bye.